Tony the, can we give Tony the high sign?
Mark's figuring something out still.
We'll be live in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Good evening, and welcome to the Board of Education regular meeting for October 23rd, 2023. And Mrs. Bonifield, would you take the roll, please?
I would love to. Mrs. Acosta.
Here.
Mrs. Bradford.
Here.
Mrs. Burton.
Here.
Mrs. Frank.
Here.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Here.
Mrs. Bonifield is here. President Johnson.
Here, we do have a quorum. And Mrs. Bradford, would you lead us in the pledge tonight?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Two more, okay. Let me put these under here. Lift that one up, thank you, Karen. What happened here? Good evening again, and welcome to our regular meeting, or what we call our voting meeting of the Board of Education. For those of you in the audience who want to follow along with our agenda, if you go out the door to my left and then turn to your right, you see not only our agenda, but you see the blue slips as well. As I indicated, this is a regular voting meeting. Many of the items that have come before, or will come before the board tonight, have already been discussed on at least 2 occasions. So you will not hear a whole lot of discussion on these items. If you want to hear our committee of the whole meeting, where we really dig into these issues and ask questions, then you can go to our website. You can also find our agenda there tonight, and if you go to livoniapublicschools.org and highlight over the board tab, you will drop down and see board information. You'll be able to see our videos, and you'll be able to follow along with our agenda. One of the things that we take very seriously here in the district is our culture and climate. And one of our characteristics, our community characteristics, is respect. Respect is one of the things that we as a board use amongst ourselves. We don't always agree with each other, but we do respect each other, and we listen to each other's views. You have our commitment that this board will be respectful to anyone who comes before the board tonight to speak, and we ask in return the same respect to the board and our cabinet. With that, we'll go ahead and get started with our communications, which is item 3, and item 3A is donor recognition of 2nd grade field trips. And we have Mrs. Jenkins.
Good evening, President Johnson, members of the board, Superintendent Oquist. Good evening. Good evening. I can get myself settled here. Tonight it is my pleasure to recognize an amazing community partnership that has resulted in the full funding for 16 second grade classrooms in LPS to experience a day at the Newburgh Schoolhouse during a field trip to the Greenmead Historical Park. This springtime field trip is a special opportunity for our second graders to experience what a typical school day was like back in the 19th century. Students, many of them dressed in period clothing as they go on their field trip, are able to connect this hands-on experience with the curriculum, as will be noted by one of our guests this evening. Tonight, we would like to recognize the community partnership that has provided funding and coordination of this special field trip to Greenmead Historical Park. As a bit of background, the Livonia Historical Society, led by Jim McConnell, was approached in February of 2022 by Grant Elementary with a request to assist with funding the field trip along with the Grant PTA. The Historical Society had provided funding for this field trip pre-COVID, and decided to do so once again. From there, the partnership grew to include the Hardee's Family Trust and a fundraising effort led by community activist Bill Joyner, which has resulted in more than $7,000 being raised to cover the expenses for 22 classes from both LPS and Clarenceville schools. That's more than 400 second graders who were able to experience a day at the Newburgh Schoolhouse just this past spring. The funds raised covered the bus transportation and a specialized program offered by staff at Greenmead. At this time, I would like to invite Jim McConnell, Bill Joyner, and Emily Shores-Fielder, who is program supervisor at Greenmead, to join me at the podium. Come on up. We've prepared a special certificate of appreciation for each of you, and the certificate reads, Livonia Public Schools Certificate of Appreciation, and then each of your names in respective organizations, for your commitment and dedication in supporting LPS students with a day at the Newburgh Schoolhouse field trips, dated October 23rd, 2023, and signed by Superintendent Oquist. And this one is for you, Mr. McConnell.
Thank you.
And for Emily. And for Bill. And Bill, I also prepared one for Dan McIver.
Yes.
If you could pass that
I will
along
be
with
happy
our
to.
great thanks. Let's see, I would also like to acknowledge other guests who have been very involved in this project throughout the years, who have also joined us this evening. We've got a second grade crew over here. Amy Schlaud, who was a second grade teacher at Grant Elementary, currently now teaching the project Lead the Way at Grant. Jen Corey, who is our K-6, right up here, who is K-6 elementary curriculum coordinator, and second grade teachers Sarah Erickson, Sandy Benson, Stephanie Gidley, and Elena Pasco. These second grade teachers have really championed this particular field trip over the years. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Grant Elementary teacher Amy Schlaud to say a few words about the students' experience and how it ties into the curriculum for our second grade students. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. So on behalf of the second grade teachers and students in Livonia, we wanted to thank you for investing in the future of our students. We are so lucky to have this gem that we call Greenmead in our own backyard. The field trip to Greenmead is the highlight of our year, and I've heard kids talking about this experience even years after, all different kinds of grades. As we go back in time, the students get to live out the experience of what it was like to learn in a one-room schoolhouse. Students get to dress up in period clothing, like Stacy said. They pack a lunch and a cloth napkin, and they get to be a part of an old-fashioned spelling bee. Through our social studies module, Then and Now, we get to explore how Livonia has evolved into the city we all love, and the students get to see it firsthand. I've had to be very creative over the last 22 years, writing grants, asking parents to pay, and even asking PTA to kind of put in a line item for grant so we can provide this experience for each one of my classes. This is why we are so thankful to the Livonia Historical Commission and the Hardee's Family Trust for funding this amazing trip. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And now I'd like to invite Bill Joyner to join us for a word. And Bill is here tonight representing the Hardee's Family Trust.
When Bob Hardee's passed away 5 years ago, he left a legacy, and it was to give back to the community as much as humanly possible. In the last 2 years, those of us involved with the Giving Committee on behalf of the late Bob Hardee's have contributed in excess of $760,000 in 2 years exclusively to Livonia. So when Jim McConnell said we'd like to take the students from Grant School, that struck a bell with me because my mother was a president of the PTA at Grant School in 1961, a year after we moved to town from Decatur, Georgia, and then for one more term before she became president of the PTA Council. So the answer was absolutely, and it took very little time for Dan McIver and I to suggest to the giving committee that we needed to make the donation. It is my hope that we will again continue this program in the coming year, because in essence, the outreach to our young children is a continuation of the legacy of Bob Hardy's. And for that, I thank the school board for giving us the opportunity, one, not only to have the program reinstituted, but also to allow the Hardy's Family Trust to again make the donation. And I might add, on a sidebar, next June, the Bentley High School marker will be dedicated, and the substantial portion of the $4,000 that go to the state to purchase the marker will come from the Hardy's Family Trust. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joyner. And now finally, a few words from Jim McConnell.
Thank you. Yeah, we're very pleased. Obviously, it was one of the unique collaborative efforts that took place because people really wanted it to happen. And it was the Grant School, of course, PTA, and Amy in particular, who educated all the rest of us about this particular program. And she's done it for about 20 years.
Yeah.
And I was involved with field trips in the Dearborn schools, so I really do appreciate the value of bringing kids and giving them an experience that they would not have in a classroom. So we definitely wanted to support it on behalf of the Livonia Historical Society. And over coffee with Bill Joyner, little conversation, and Bill said, well, we can do this. We can raise money to get all the kids to do it. And by God, working with Emily from Greenmead and Jen on behalf of the schools, Bill, myself, and Jean Kramer, the five of us met, put together the parameters of what became this program. And as Stacy indicated, it went very well the first year, and we can tell you that with Bill's help, once again, we are well on our way to raising about $10,000, and we want to fund every second grade student in the district, as well as in the 6 in Clarenceville, 47. We anticipate that based on logistical issues that we'll probably have about 32 to 35 classes actually participate. Emily has already arranged the schedule so that we can still take all 47 if it happens to work out that way. If it doesn't work out, we're already working on funding for, what is it, spring of 20, I get trouble with the years here, 2025. So in 2025, we know that all 47 classes, or whatever number it is at that time, will be involved with it. So we're really, really pleased. And again, it was such a wonderful collaborative effort. It's been a joy to work with all of the people that were involved with this committee. And so we're glad to be here tonight. And I need to tell you that there's just a couple other things that the Historical Society is involved with. We were very honored to work with the Livonia Schools Foundation on October 1st. And Laura Ulasic, and worked with Kathy Bilger, a Livonia historian, to put together a cemetery walk. And the thing that I really liked about it, we had over 100 people attend. It was a great day, beautiful sunshine, nice warm weather, and it had kids from the school district involved. Kathy's, one of her criteria for a good cemetery walk is that it involves students from the local schools. So she had 2 kids from Churchill, 1 from Stevenson, and they were dressed in period costume. They learned the script for the person who was buried at that location. And then to get the other high school involved, it was the National Honor Society from Franklin, who served as the tour guides leading the groups around the cemetery. So it was just a wonderful experience. And because the Historical Society is viewed as a group that looks to the past, I want to tell you that we're looking to the future as well. And I want you to mark down, as Bill already indicated, June 15th, next year, 2 p.m., you should be at the Kirksey Recreation Center when we dedicate a Michigan historical marker for George Nelson Bentley High School. Now, there's one caveat on this one. The Michigan Historical Commission meets on November 9th to approve the text for the marker. We are now involved in negotiations on exactly what that marker text should say. There are 9 of them on the board, And if I have 5 votes, we will have the marker. I need to have 5 votes. So put it down in pencil. You all know what that means. I think a superintendent knows how to count to 4. Well, the Historical Commission will approve the marker, and shortly after that is done, you will be officially notified, but informally, I tell you right now. The other thing that's even further into the future is May 23rd. It's a Friday, May 23rd in the year 2025. On that date, the city of Livonia will be 75 years old. I don't want to say that I'm doing something off of my agenda of recognizing field trips, but I'm doing something off of my agenda recognizing field trips. I want to be sure that the Board of Education is aware that this celebration may not match the 1976 bicentennial, but Bill Joyner is determined to make it even better. And he needs the schools involved. So with that, I say thank you very much for your time and for your service to this community. As an almost 50-year resident, I love what this board has done for education. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That concludes our presentation and our official appreciation for this marvelous effort. Let's give them one more round of applause.
Thank you, Stacy. Did you want to add something, Mrs. Oquist?
I did. Thank you, President Johnson. So thank you so much to our honorees for being here this evening and for your partnership with us. I appreciate Mrs. Corey and members of our wonderful second grade teaching team for being here. On behalf of the students, my own 2 children had the joy of participating in the experience in the one-room schoolhouse many years ago. It still remains one of their fondest memories, and as a principal, I know we sent off many students with their knapsacks and other things as they spent the day back in history. And what a wonderful opportunity and a partnership between folks who care so much about our students. I think that's one of the things that continues to strike me about our community is the willingness to support the efforts in our schools. So thank you to each of you for being here. We appreciate the partnership you've had with us, and we're very excited to send a lot of happy second grade kiddos this year once again.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist. Anything from the board?
No.
Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. I forgot to mention, we're going to take a short recess after item B, which is our district update from our superintendent, and that is going to take place right now.
All righty. Thank you, President Johnson. We'll see the update up on the screen, so wherever you are in the room, hopefully you can take a glimpse here. We will start out with just some highlights across the district of some great learning and growing that we have as we enter our 9th week of the school year already. So here we see Ms. Kernan's advanced med students from the Livonia Career Technical Center who went over to the Stuffy Wellness Clinic at Buchanan Elementary. So I know you've seen some pictures of this, but our first graders were able to perform checkups on their stuffed animal friends with the help of their senior buddy. And so these are students who are part of the medical courses at LCTC. And they were able to come in and simulate having a patient and working with their doctor friends in first grade at Buchanan. So a great partnership there, and a wonderful day was had by all. We see a number of our students here from our amazing Garfield Community School. They're doing some cooking, some landscaping, recycling, and planting on both of these slides. And of course, their work out in the community here at the warehouse and throughout the work sites that we see, the partnerships that continue to grow. We are so proud of our students who continue to have these opportunities. We know their work at their work sites is one of the most important elements of their day. So here we have some additional pictures from the Western Wayne Skills Center. We have our students learning some building skills, some cooking skills, and those life skills are so important and an essential part of our curriculum. So we just want to give a shout out to our Garfield Community School staff and the opportunities they provide our young adults each and every day. So here we have our
Our kiddos, whoop, I went one too far. Over at Frost Middle School, they have so many opportunities, as you know, across our middle schools and high schools to participate in the elective classes. So we wanted to highlight a few here. We see our band class. We see our kiddos enjoying foods class. I remember at Holmes, that was always one of my favorite classes. In computer tech and digitech and some of the other opportunities our students have to explore different interests. We know the importance of their core academics, but when they have the opportunity to engage in some of these different electives, that's so, so important to them. And speaking of field trips, we had our global ed students from Stevenson recently head out to Greenfield Village, I believe now called Henry Ford, is that the Henry? But I still refer to it as Greenfield Village, as I'm sure many of us do. A great day to watch history come alive. And as you know, our global education students dig deeply into history and into some of the global impact of history on our on issues of today. One of a tried and true tradition as we look in our K-4 schools are those pumpkin days where we measure pumpkins and we weigh pumpkins and we get to feel the goo inside of pumpkins. And so no different here at Rosedale as our kiddos dug in to find out what makes a pumpkin. And we have a class here at Cooper Upper Elementary. They were practicing for a play, so I know our Franklin players will be happy to hear that they will have some experienced students coming their way. But we have students in class who are doing some practicing there. Once again, back at Rosedale, not just pumpkins, but apples. We see some sweeties here getting ready to make applesauce, and of course, the best part, tasting it. And at Coolidge, our students here are using their VEX kits during Project Lead the Way. They're building simple machines on an inclined plane and using the resources they have available in that class. As you know, Project Lead the Way continues to inspire and innovate our students' thinking as it comes to the concepts of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And we are so thankful that every single one of our students, K through 6, has the opportunity to experience this every single week. And we are already getting into the spirit. While Halloween may still be a little bit away, although it's only a week now, isn't it? Not too far away. We have some of our kiddos here already getting into the spirit. You've got to love these great costumes. And we love our partnership with different police departments across our community. We were so pleased to have the Detroit Police Department partner with Hayes Elementary School. They brought their breast cancer awareness patrol car this week, a great opportunity for our kiddos to not only meet some of our wonderful service providers from the Detroit Police Department, but also be able to help spread awareness during this important month. Speaking of being in the pink, our Western Wayne Skills Center friends wore pink throughout this month to support breast cancer research. So we see some more of the smiling faces of students and staff at Garfield School. And of course, it was homecoming, as you know, over the past couple of weeks. We celebrated homecoming at each of our high schools. We saw lots of exciting events leading up to it, whether it was pep rallies or activities on the field, and then, of course, the games and marching bands and pom and cheer and everybody taking part. Lots of alumni coming back, and as you know, we have lots of generations of Livonia pride coming through, and so went off very, very well in the dances over the weekend. So always marks an important element of fall as we celebrate that. More partners in the community. We had firefighter Randy at Coolidge, and he was a hit. He was able to talk to the students about firefighter jobs and the role that they have, and talk a little bit about the work that our wonderful firefighters do in our community. And that's really always an area of interest. Whenever our kiddos have a chance to interact with our service providers, that is always a great one. Middle school sports are coming to a close, so we had cross country and volleyball. Both those seasons are winding down, and our coaches, our student athletes and families were just dedicated throughout the fall season. So we congratulate them on that hard work of learning to become an athlete and a student at the same time. Well, you know about our Peer Connections from our visit to Frost. They were able to highlight our wonderful Peer Connections program at Frost Middle School, and that we have at a number of our schools. So we see some of our kiddos here connecting and having opportunities to share fun activities with one another and to build those relationships together. We have our Johnson team members, so Johnson Upper Elementary, members of the current and former Johnson team members were able to share their support and spirit for one another, all wearing Believe shirts and getting together a couple of weeks ago in support of our Johnson staff. And just last week, we had our administrative leadership team, we refer to that team as ALT, did a lot of collaborating, connecting. We met for a couple of hours after school. Last week, we had an opportunity to really dig into some of our priorities for this year. One is enhancing employee capacity. So we had an opportunity to share ideas with one another in mixed groups as well as some light groups, and we were really starting to talk about StrengthsFinder 2.0, which really focuses on our leader strengths and how that can generate some excitement within their work setting. And so Franklin High School hosted us in their updated and newly renovated media center, and it was a great opportunity to connect our leaders across the district. And as the board knows, we had a great opportunity on October 5th to visit the new Early Childhood Center, our first new build in over 50 years in Livonia Public Schools. And so it is definitely coming along. It will be 76,000 square feet. I think at this point in time, we were in what will be called one of the family rooms. So clustered in the center of a cluster of classrooms, we will have family rooms and mud rooms to be able to create that all-together feel for our students and for our parents as they drop off our kiddos each day. And it was a bit of a chilly day, but we had a great opportunity to go from the front end all the way to the back. It is on target, and we are hoping to have it turned over to us in June of 2024 for an opening in August of 2024. So, boy, has it moved along. I'd like to give a big shout out to, do I have to get off the screen here?
The escape key.
I don't know if I have that on this clicker.
On your keyboard.
Oh, it's not my computer, actually. It's off of, thank you, I appreciate that. It's a group technology thing here. We once again held Portraits at the Barn. It was a great fundraiser for the LPS Education Foundation, and I just want to give a huge shout out to everyone who spent the entire day before 9 a.m., past 5 p.m. We had our volunteer photographers from Cabinet, Mrs. Teresa O'Brien, Mrs. Stacy Jenkins, and Mrs. Emily Thompson, who's back in the control room, our president of our foundation, Mrs. Jarvis, Laura Ulasic, our director, our executive director, and so many other volunteers who spent the entire day. Are these not the sweetest families? So we had to move it to Sunday because Saturday was a washout. But most families were able to reschedule and come to their time on Sunday. And so thank you again. It's not only a great fundraiser, but I think these families treasure this. We had one of our families, I think, is this year 3 or year 4? Year 3. And one of our families asked if we could continue doing this until the child is a senior, and a graduating senior, and they're only 7 years old, so that's a long time to commit. But we love this opportunity to bring our community in and take these photos and share them with families. So a few kudos. As you know, our marching bands are just second to none. You see our Churchill Marching Band here. They received a Division I Superior rating at MSBOA, the District 12 Marching Band Festival. Now, remember, they have been working hard since the start of the summer. They work all through the summer, all through the fall, and continue to really just reach their peak. And congratulations to both Churchill and to Stevenson. So Stevenson also participated in the MSBOA Festival and received a superior rating. They received straight 1s and all A's for their performance. So congratulations to both Matt Van Ham, who's the director at Churchill, Heather Wickman, the director at Stevenson, and of course our talented young musicians who are just so dedicated to their craft. I mean, this takes so much time and effort, but boy, do they shine. And Stevenson recently started a tradition at home games. They honored each of their KLAA East Division championship teams. So the Stevenson girls swimming, the boys soccer, and girls volleyball were all East Division champs. And they were brought down to the track and celebrated at our most recent, one of our most recent home games. We had a Churchill student, Cole Booth, receive the Vocational Service Award from Livonia Rotary. You see Cole there with Dr. Haas and other members. You see Mr. Wenstrom, our president of Rotary, and Ms. Gray, our principal at LCTC. The Rotary kindly supports and honors 3 of our students in the Livonia Career Technical Program, 1 from each high school every year. And it's a great opportunity to hear about their successes and the work they're doing at LCTC. So a shout out to Rotary for continuing to be wonderful partners and such a support to our students. Just recently, Denise Berg Grant, Churchill High School longtime tennis coach, was once again named the MHSAA Regional Coach of the Year. She spends an enormous amount of time sharing her talents. She is also one of our physical education teachers in the district, so congratulations to Denise on this honor. Today, we were really honored to be host to colleagues from both RISA and from Anchor Bay for 2 different reasons. So Mrs. Sproul and Mrs. Feigl and members of our LTP staff hosted RISA out at LTP today, and they were able to see the Livonia Transition Program, which works to meet the needs of our 18 to 26-year-old students with special needs. As you know, those classes are held. We rent out a portion of the Jeffress Center at Schoolcraft College. They spend a half of their day there and a half of their day at one of our over 24 work sites. Again, our community partnering with us, and they were truly impressed and thought the program and the opportunities for students were like they had never seen. And one of the questions that they asked was, how can you afford to do this? How can you afford to have this offsite location, this transportation, the transportation for our students to individual work sites, and provide such a rich experience? And Mrs. Sproul was able to share with them that our Board of Education supports to continued use of our general fund dollars to support the Livonia Transition Program, because it is important that all of our children from pre-K through post-secondary have the richest opportunities possible. And so I wanted to acknowledge that for our board, because it is an important element of our budget decision making each year. And I think, Mrs. Prow, you can attest, they were absolutely wowed by what they saw. So we were pleased to welcome them here today. And also colleagues from Anchor Bay, they are looking to do renovations in their media centers and update some of their collaboration areas. So they were able to go to Franklin and Emerson and Cooper. So thank you to those schools and Mr. Francis for hosting Anchor Bay today. They were able to see the idea factories in use at the elementary, middle school level, and then of course Franklin, the collaboration areas within the newly renovated media center. Finally, just a few mark your calendar notes. Just a reminder that the LPS Parent Fair on November 8th. This is for parents of students across the district from any school, parents of teens and preteens. We have a parent fair that was held in prior years, very, very well attended. It's going to be at Stevenson High School. There are a number of topics on social media, on anxiety and stress, on, I'm going to, my aging eyes, I'm going to read it off of my computer. We have depression and suicide, substance abuse, divorce and blended families, setting parental boundaries and limits, and LPS diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And so we have a number of different breakout groups. There will initially be a gathering in the Performing Arts Center, and then there will be breakout sessions for parents, and there will also be a couple of dozen vendors there with supports for parents as well. So if you have a teen or a preteen, please mark your calendar and join us on November 8th at Stevenson. And we are thrilled to be welcoming Carolyn Clifford from WXYZ. She is our guest speaker this year. We cannot wait to host her on November 1st. From 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. If you would like ticket information, you can go to the LPS Education Foundation website. Please join us. It will be a wonderful event. And then a few more mark your calendars. It is definitely fall theater season. So Franklin Players will be presenting 13 Past Midnight, November 3rd through the 5th. And as always, we will be putting this update on the front of our website, so you can flip back through here and get all this information as well as the QR codes to purchase tickets and choose your seat. Capel will be presenting Sweeney Todd, School Edition, on November 10th through 12th and the 17th through the 19th. And Stevenson will be presenting, the drama department will be presenting The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, December 8th through 10th. So you'll notice that each one of those flyers has a QR code. You can go on. Remember, our kiddos spend so much time practicing, late nights, both on stage and behind the stage. We have students in the tech classes, students on creating scenes and helping with costumes, and then, of course, all of our performers. So please go out and cheer them on. And finally, we just remind you to stay connected through the LPS link. We've created a new communication. It comes out every other week. We will push those out to you in your email inbox. We really do try to be relatively brief, but informative, and we are hoping that you're enjoying finding that place where you can go to get a lot of essential information every other week to all of our families, all of our staff, and any of our community that would like to sign up for that. So thank you so much, President Johnson, for letting us share all of the good things happening across the district.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist. We always enjoy hearing all of the good things that are going on. As I indicated, yes. Yes.
Mrs. Oquist, if folks want to subscribe, you said community members can subscribe to the Livonia link. How do they do that?
It's on the front of our website.
It is, okay.
Under announcements.
Okay, in case anyone did not hear that, it's on the front of our website under announcements. So if anybody
Yes.
in the community wants to receive the Livonia link, which comes out every couple of weeks, you can sign up for it and keep up on all the latest LPS info. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton.
President Johnson.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. I have a question as well. Mrs. Oquist, for the parent fair on November 8th, must parents pre-register for that, or can they walk in?
They can simply walk in.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. We'll now take about a 5 to 10 minute recess. We'll be back. Thank you. Good evening, and we are back from our recess, and we will continue on with our agenda. That brings us to item 3C, written communications. I do not have any written communications. That takes us to item 3D, response to prior audience communication. Is there any response? Seeing none, that'll move us then on to our audience communication. Audience communication is the point in the meeting where the board listens to the concerns of the community. It is not a question and answer period for the board, and there is no colloquy between the speakers and the board. One thing people should keep in mind is that the board has three primary roles. One is to set policy for the district. The second is to hire and evaluate the superintendent. And the third is to align our funding priorities with the district goals. Those are limiting factors in what the board can and cannot do. So you need to keep that in mind when you're speaking tonight. Audience communication is limited to 15 minutes at this point in time. Each speaker gets 3 minutes to speak. We have a timer. Mrs. Bradford will time the 3 minutes, and Mrs. Bonifield will time the 15 minutes. I have 21 blue slips. So it's going to be quite an evening. However, we are limited at this point in our agenda to 15 minutes. If everyone speaks for 3 minutes, that'll be 5 speakers. If they are a little bit shorter, we might get to 6, we might get to 7. But we will conclude at 15 minutes. Anyone who has not been heard at that time, we can pick it up at the end of our agenda after hearing from board members. That would be the very last thing on our agenda. So I want to make sure that everybody understands how that's going to proceed tonight. With that in mind, I got the blue slips I put them in order of when I received them. So if you don't get in the first group, you can wait until the end of the meeting. The first blue slip I have is Karen Tennis. Good evening. Can you just tap that microphone?
No, red button.
There it's on. There you go.
Feel free to adjust that.
Okay, good evening. My name is Karen Tennis. I'm here to speak on behalf of Mama J. I have known Mama J for some 30 years. I've always known her in a teaching capacity, not always in a structured setting as your own in the, as your school district, but also in community events, volunteer programs, outreach programs, always putting children first. Not only does she teach what is expected of her, but she also teaches her students motivation, self-esteem, and respect. Her students respect her. Her students like her. Her students learn from her. America is known to be a throwaway society. Please don't throw away Mama J. You need her. The kids need her. Thank you.
Our next speaker is, I think it just says Darby. Is it Darby? Yeah. Oh, hi, Darby.
Where is it? If you want to move the microphone, you can. It'll bend. You can.
Oh, nice.
There you go.
Okay. There was a conflict between another student and me, and I went to speak with the principal. I told him exactly what happened, and he told the exact opposite of what I said to my mom. And now I do not trust the principal. After that, like maybe a day, there was another incident with a different student, and it went way too far for a couple days because I did not want to tell anyone because I thought the principal would lie again. That's all.
Thank you, Darby. My next blue slip is Jenny Granke. Am I saying that right? Close enough.
I don't really care.
Thank you.
I'm Jenny Grinke. Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. October is National Bullying Prevention Month, so I would like to discuss the long-term effects of bullying. ACEs are a way to estimate childhood trauma. People with more ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, have more health problems in adulthood and can even have a decreased lifespan. Childhood bullying is considered when factoring a person's ACE score. Bullying can cause both mental and physical health problems into adulthood, depression, eating disorders, academic difficulties, and an increased risk of suicide, to name a few. Being a witness to bullying is also considered an ACE and can cause substance abuse as well as other physical and mental illnesses. The bully themselves is at risk for trouble with the law and developing mental health issues. In my experience, LPS bullying policies are not followed and or are not well known. I've heard countless stories from parents that are heartbreaking and detrimental for our children. While I understand that parents should be raising their kids with emotional intelligence, we know that this isn't a perfect world. We should feel safe sending our children to school. We should not be concerned for their health and mental well-being while they are at the school in their care. Livonia Public Schools should be a leader in bullying prevention. Staff should be trained effectively to address bullying and not just ignore the problem. Everyone in the vicinity of bullying is affected for life. This is a serious issue that should be addressed immediately and thoughtfully. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker I have is Melissa Sampe.
Oh, sorry. Have this
You're
down.
fine.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Councilwoman Melissa Sampe from the city of Westland. I am a graduate of Livonia Churchill High School. I'm a proud Livonia parent. My son is a junior at Churchill High School. My stepdaughter graduated from Churchill, and my parents graduated from Franklin. Very long history in our family of Livonia graduates. And my role is unique because I have constituents in both Westland and Livonia. I have had so many constituents come to me with their disgust that Mama J has been banned from Livonia Public Schools. And I'm here today writing and expressing my concern and disappointment on the recent ban. Mama J has been a substitute teacher in Livonia, but also Wayne Westland schools. Wayne Westland is very lucky because, and I have to say this because they're my constituents too, they get to see her very often. For some reason, Mama J has been banned from Livonia. There's been very little communication to Mama J, very little communication to the children. I know that you guys had a very short time period to have people speak, but as you can see, and I know people at home can't see, there's about 50 people in here, which I don't know if they're going to be able to speak, 50 people in here supporting Mama J, which shows her dedication, her passion, and her support for students. And Mama J, in fact, actually showed up at my son's birthday party and railed the troops up to get them to dance because it was the biggest snowstorm of the year. Mama J has reached out to students who are struggling. Mama J has brought in food to students that have food insecurity. Also, Mama J has sponsored a lot of Livonia school teams and sports. It saddens me to learn that such a highly regarded substitute teacher has been banned, and throughout the district at that. So her unique, creative measure to teaching students, I often wonder, is it not approached? Is it not accepted? Mama J comes in and she brings passion that we've never seen. And what I'm understanding is that Livonia is having a substitute problem. My son actually said his first-hour teacher has been chronically ill. And there's a teacher that mentioned to him that they can't get a substitute teacher to fill in because he's using those substitute teachers. Yet Mama J, who is a substitute teacher, has said, I will teach those babies. I absolutely will teach those babies. I love those babies. But again, she's at Wayne Wesleyan School. So what I ask is I consider the board to reconsider the ban remark, on Mama J. And rather than just severing the ties, work with Mama J to figure out a solution, because these children in this room right here, they need her, and they really appreciate having her around, and her spirits are really, down, because she loves those babies and they love her too. So what I'm asking today is that you guys discuss among the board, figure out how we can bring Mama J back to Livonia Public Schools. She's needed, she's loved, and I can tell you right now, my constituents are not happy. They have been calling me left and right, and they want her back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Janetta Howard. Good evening.
Hello. How's everyone?
Good.
Miss Francis is my tax advisor and accountant for One Stop Better Driving School. I'm also a foster mom, and I've had to call on her for help and resources for these kids. So I know she has genuine love for kids, and it would be a shame not to have her in Livonia. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next one I have is Adriana Haviland. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Adriana Haviland. I attend Franklin. And I have been hearing a lot of talk about the ban on Mama J, and the students at the school are not happy about it. Mama J has really made the students realize that if you want respect, you have to earn it. It's not given. She is respected by all the students. When she speaks, people listen. When she teaches, people learn. She is needed at the schools. People have been so chaotic now that she's not there. She is someone who kept the school in line and in check. She truly did change the school, and ever since she's been gone, everything has been different. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Bridget Casey.
Hi.
Hi.
Good evening. My son had an occurrence, and his principal was explaining the other boys, the boy's situation. Only he told me one side, and he said that my son said something completely different. When I approached my son about what the principal said, he became upset because he did not say the words that I was told. My son's story never changed when I went to him after school and told him what his principal said. The principal made up, just completely made up what my son told me. And I emailed pretty much all of you about it. And I said that Mr. DeLuca, my principal, lied to me, because he did. And Mr. Green's response was to tell me that he could put in a transfer to another school. It doesn't really seem like that is a solution to this problem that's been occurring, where our principal has been lying to us about things about our children regularly. I don't understand how a principal is allowed to call me a liar. He walked up to my car last April, knocked on my window, and for about 10 minutes in the pickup line, explained to me why I am a liar because of things I wrote on social media. But when I call him out for lying about what my son said, I'm told to transfer schools. I would like to know how that is an acceptable solution, and why the double standard is there that a principal can call a parent a liar, but when a parent calls him out, I'm told to leave because I'm unsatisfied with the way he's handling the school. It doesn't really make sense to me, and I would just like to know how this is being allowed in Livonia Public Schools.
The next speaker is it Mr. Jones?
Good evening, good afternoon.
Good evening, Mr. Jones.
My name is Jimmy Jones, and today I'm speaking from the heart for Mama J. Mama J is a very valuable person in my family and in the community. Mama J has worked in the school systems for over 10 years, 10 plus years, and she has a passion for learning, passion to help the children to go to the next level. She expands the curriculum here at Livonia schools. She expands the pedagogy here in Livonia schools, and she enhances and diversifies the students in their learning. It would really, truly be a shame if Mama J was not to come back here. You can see, and it's a proven track record board, that the students are here. I'm a proven educator. I've worked in the school systems in Wayne County and Oakland County for over 25 years. And I know to be an effective teacher, you have to have a passion to do the job. And the students respond in regards to how well you conduct the classroom and you demand respect for the students. And I'm here as a friend, as a family member, to bring Mama J back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. The next speaker is Juanita Francis. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to appreciate my village for being here tonight, the babies that I affectionately call them, my family, my clients, my councilwoman, Melissa Hunt Sampe, and each of you. My name is Juanita Francis, and I stand before you today seeking due process for my recent removal from the LPS. A notice, an opportunity to be heard, an impartial tribunal. Before September 22nd, I received an email notification that I had been removed from certain buildings within the Livonia School District. After an inquiry about this removal, I received an email from Ms. Nennis of LPS stating why I had been removed from previous buildings. After my response to her email and an inquiry with an administrator, I was permanently removed from LPS without due process or notice to me and my employer. Prior to this occurring, I had not had a fair opportunity to understand the allegations made or to respond to them. I have been a guest educator for over 16 years, serving in multiple school districts. I make it a priority to uphold the duties and responsibilities that are bestowed upon me. The safety and security of our babies is a priority, knowing our babies being so aware of their behaviors that I can identify issues or concerns that became a priority. To many, I am affectionately known as Mama J. In the African community, they call educators like us destiny helpers, helping to get our children on their divine path. I have worked hard to achieve this goal, and I did not get the honor of this name by being mediocre. I persevered. I overcame obstacles, a coma back in November 2010. I earned that right by filling myself and becoming authentic to my divine calling. It is important to me that I would exemplify all the qualities of endearment that are held by someone considered a mama, including being considered a mama to babies that I did not birth, a double honor. I strive to inspire and connect with students in a way that meets their needs and challenges. I understand the culture of the environment and spaces where I serve and work because I pay attention to the students. I don't just hear them, I listen, and as a result, when I speak, they listen. This mutual understanding allows us to accomplish our educational, emotional, and social goals for the time we are together, and often for the day. Occasionally, I do provide meals for those who would otherwise go without. If a person needs help, I would refer to someone if I'm not able to help. I have provided free master dance classes to each of them. I have provided scholarships to further their education. Additional tutoring and special attention have been given to those in need. At times, I have offered nothing more than a smile and a positive energy. Therefore, it is important to know that small things count. I make it a point to leave every person I encounter with a small thing, a cheery greeting, a positive outlook, or a kind word. A smile goes a long way for a student or employee who may have had a bad encounter.
Ms. Francis, could you wrap up your beyond the
Yes.
3 minutes?
Therefore, I am totally confused by the allegations that have been made about me because I have made it a point to be a shining example for myself first. I would like for the school board, the school district, to do a due process to inquire why I was removed from Livonia Public Schools and bring me back, because these babies need me as I need them.
Thank you. That's going to conclude our audience communication at this point, and we are going to move on with our agenda. Yes, the remainder of those speakers will be picked up at the end of the meeting. That brings us to item 4, our consent agenda. Is there any item on the consent agenda that any board member would like to have removed? Seeing none, may I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mrs. Burton.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the following consent agenda items as recommended by the superintendent. 5A, minutes of the regular meeting of September 25th, 2023. 5B, minutes of the closed meeting of October 2nd, 2023.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Burton, supported by Mrs. Bradford. And Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
I would take the roll. Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes, that motion carries. That now takes us to item 6A under our business matters, and A is approval of purchase of wrestling mats for Stevenson High School. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mrs. Acosta.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the purchase of wrestling mats for Stevenson High School in the amount of $29,255 from Dalumar Sports Services.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Acosta, supported by Mrs. Jarvis, and we'll welcome Mr. Etu. Good evening.
Thank you, President Johnson. Board of Education, yes, this is for wrestling mats at Stevenson High School in their practice wrestling room. We had 3 bids that went out. We went with, we're recommending Dalumar in terms of purchasing of these wrestling mats. Dalumar has worked with both Churchill High School and Franklin High School in the past year and a half in replacing those mats. They also came in at the lowest bid, as referenced in the cap sheet, of $29,255. So we are recommending the purchase of these mats for Stevenson High School.
Thank you, Mr. Etu. Any questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Burton?
And for those who may not have tuned into our committee of the whole meeting, these are replacing mats that are 20-plus years old.
Correct. All 3 schools, their mats are at end of life, so this is about 22 years old at this point in time.
Okay, all right. And we expect to probably get another 20 years use out of them or something in that ballpark?
We're hoping so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Acosta, supported by Mrs. Jarvis, to approve the purchase of wrestling mats at Stevenson High School. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes, that motion carries. That takes us to item 6B, acceptance of financial statements 2022, 2023. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson?
Mrs. Bonnefield?
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the 22-23 audit report as presented by the audit firm of Plant Moran.
Support.
I heard Mrs. Burton. So we have a motion by Mrs. Bonnefield, supported by Mrs. Burton, and we're going to hear from Mrs. Smith. Good evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the time last week we had during the committee meeting and prior to that at the study session to go over the results of the 22-23 school year. We took a look at the budget to actual. Last week we had our auditors go over some of the key highlights of the financial statement. So they're back again to do a more abbreviated version of that. But I'm happy to introduce to you Lisa Vargo and Tom Marchese. They are from the audit firm Plant Moran, and they have a slideshow that they're going to run through with us tonight. So with that, I will turn it over.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Good evening.
Good evening. How's
Nice
everyone
to see
doing
you
today?
again.
Nice to see you
Well,
guys.
thank you.
So first of all, my name is Lisa Vargo, and I'm a partner at Plant Moran. I specialize in our K-12 service group. And Tom Marchese is a principal at Plant Moran, also specializes in our K-12 group. So we appreciate the opportunity to have this time to present our audit results. So before we start getting into the numbers and the slides, I just really want to take a few moments and talk about what an audit is and what we do and the whole point of what we're hired to come into and do. Ultimately, our goal is to put an opinion on the financial statements. We are hired to put an opinion on the basic financial statements and then the single audit report. The single audit report is a compliance report. I'm happy to report that you have both an unmodified opinion on both the basic financial statements and the single audit, which is the highest level of assurance we can provide that your financial statements are free of material misstatements. So that's fantastic. It's a clean report. I want to take one step back as well for the compliance side and really talk about what that means, because compliance audits are tough. It's yes or no's, right or wrong. And we have a listing from the federal government that says we need to make sure that the district is complying to all these requirements. And if you're not, we do need to make a report. And we did not find anything. Those sample sizes, to put it in context, are large. It really depends what the population is, but some of the sample sizes could be 40, 60. It really just depends. But to be able for us to take a step back and be able to say we didn't find anything, to be like they're not following the guidelines exactly as given, is remarkable. Great job. Also to point out, we had to test 4 programs this year, which is a lot. Normally, the rotations of programs that we test might be 1 or 2. So the 4 programs we had to test this year were child nutrition, IDEA, and then 2 of the COVID relief funds. So those are higher risk programs that we have to focus in on, and we need to make sure that we have the proper reporting going back to the federal government. So great job. We focus on procurement. We focus on requirements that the federal government would have for procurement. We also follow and we look what state and local guidelines would say for procurement. And everything fell where we would expect, and everyone did a great job. Documentation was right in line. We had no problems with that. So congratulations. It's a huge accomplishment. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom. He's going to go over high level with some of the numbers, and then I will bring us back to fund balance and a little bit more federal programs. All right. Which way does it? Oops. Which way does it turn? Nay. Oh, sorry.
Technical difficulties.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. It's good to see everybody again. My name is Tom Marchese, as Lisa introduced me, and I'll be going through some of the high-level financial results for the district. On this slide here, the table represents all fund level activities for the district. You can see your 4 major funds across the top. You have your general fund, that's your primary operating fund, your special education fund, and your 2021 bond series 1 and 2 funds. So a couple of things to note. The general fund assets were $75 million and the liabilities were $43 million. The fund balance of the general fund, there was a planned use of about $1.3 million, so that declined to $31.5 million as of fiscal year end 2023. We'll have more detail on slides, in a few slides, just discuss reasons for the decrease. Significant assets in the general fund are cash and state receivables for July and August state aid, and significant liabilities within the general fund include summer pays for teachers. The fund balance in 2021 bond series 1 and 2 funds are restricted for capital expenditures, and those will decrease over time as bond proceeds are expended. Slide 3 provides the budgetary comparison schedule for the general fund. This excludes the funded projects fund activity. The funded projects are traditionally a break-even fund that accounts for all the restricted grants at the district. This is a common practice used across school districts and academies across the state. The best practices of sound budgeting would range between 1% and 3% variances for spending. And as you can see on the far right, the district, out of $176 million of revenue and expenditures, comes within 0.3% of those budgeted expenditures and revenues. So this small variance provides a testament of the quality within the business office's financial budgeting process. So slide 4 provides a breakdown of the combined general fund, which includes the funded projects. You can see the far right column includes $205 million of revenues, which is $30 million of funded projects revenues and other sources, and $175 million of the standalone general fund. So the item to point out here is the funded projects fund. You can see at the bottom there's a zero fund balance. This demonstrates the break-even nature of that funded projects fund. General fund revenue and expenditures increased by about 13% from the prior year, and 6% of the increased expenditures in the general fund relate to a one-time retirement contribution by the state of Michigan of $10.5 million. So this amount was paid into the district and passed straight back to ORS. It's worth noting that within the general fund revenues of $175 million, that there was $767,000 of investment income during the current year. So the district was able to capitalize on the rising rate environment by recognizing yields on investments that were allowable within the school district. So that's money that would not have been there if the money was not invested properly. In prior years, there was not that, there was not much in terms of opportunities with the lower rates that existed. So this is the first year that there's been significant investment income within the general fund in recent years. So this next slide provides a breakdown, the pie chart of the district's general fund expenditures. You can see at the top there's about $177 million of expenditures. You can see that as an organization that people are the biggest resource. The largest components of the expenditures, which are about 89%. I'm sorry, is this revenue?
Yeah, you've got the revenue in it.
I must have skipped. So you can see revenue is represented $175 million. The largest piece is the state aid, and that is just driven largely by pupil count. The other big chunk is your local source revenue. That's largely property taxes. And then you have other smaller segments for your Wayne County enhancement millage of about $5 million, along with some other smaller pieces for federal and other minor revenue sources. So the next slide represents expenditures. And this is where we lay out the breakdown of salary and benefits to employees across the district. You can see that the biggest pieces of the pie are about 89% for your retirement cost, employee benefits, and salaries and wages. So this is consistent from prior years as well. So slide 7 provides some commentary on the MIPSR's retirement system liability. So the MIPSRS plan covers the pension and other post-employment benefits of retirees, and the system shows a net liability of about $40 billion as of fiscal year end 2023. So the district presents a proportionate share of that unfunded liability, and the district's liability is about $426 million from the retirement system's unfunded liability. A couple things to note: this does not impact the district's fund level financial statements. Nearly all districts in Michigan will show a deficit net position on their financial statements because of this proportionate share that's allocated to them. And there's little discretion that the district has at a local level for the liability itself. So the next slide just provides a schedule that shows the impact to the government-wide statements. So this would be your full accrual statements and the lack of impact at the fund level. So with that, I'll turn it back to Lisa, and she'll go over a couple final slides here.
Great, thanks, Tom. All right, so we've mentioned briefly about fund balance. So fund balance is the accumulation in the general fund of your revenue over your expenses year over year after year. So this graph, we really wanted to kind of show a history of the percent of expenditures in the total general fund. It's really a key matrix or a key measure that people can use to measure the health of a district. The MSBO's guideline is 15 to 20%. You can see that the district is within that percent and remains to be within the percent. The reason why fund balance continues to be very important to making sure that we're keeping an eye on it is that fund balance is what gives the districts the ability to duck and weave, so to speak. So as things, things might not be very predictable, or you might not really know exactly what's going to happen, to have the flexibility in the fund balance, to have it liquid, is extremely important and a key, great financial metric for the district. One thing I do want to point out is that during the fiscal year, the bond rating was upgraded from an A to an A+. That's really important to identify because having a better bond rating does decrease your interest rates, and that was able to decrease your expenditure. I think it was about $900,000, which that's, again, more money in the classroom. So that's very important. That is directly attributed to the fund balance. And the last slide, we only put this up here because I did mention earlier that there were we had to test 2 federal programs. Over the past couple of years, this has been the hot topic that we've constantly been talking about. We've had to test these are the COVID relief programs. What this graph represents, in what we wanted to show, is that the blue bar represents the grant, and then the orange bar, how much the district has spent to date. And we also want to identify the time period in which that you can expend to date. The district has done a fantastic job keeping an eye on this. These are one-time revenues, and they are expense-based revenues. So it isn't anything that can build your fund balance, but it was very important to have and to use to make sure that you're using it. And I would say management did a fantastic job making sure that the funds were being expended on proper items, and knowing that they were only one-time hits and weren't creating a ton of legacy costs to continue year after year. So we wanted to point this out. We won't see it again because the funding's gonna, sunset. But so it was a great job, the great use of funds, really good use of funds. So with that, that wraps up our presentation. I want to take the opportunity and thank everybody. The professionalism, the clean records, the great financial results. It feels great to be up here and be able to present it.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Bonifield.
Hi, thank you so much for all your work. I know you mentioned that we earned a substantial income from our investments, and I know a lot of us are taking a sound beating right now on our investments. And so Can you just talk about, you mentioned it very briefly, that there are qualified investments that we can make, and just to reassure the viewing public that there are only certain things that we can invest in, and where we really, it limits our.
Yes. So there are rules about what public funds can be invested in. And the reason it has created so much income is because of what is happening with interest rates. I'm sure everybody's hearing interest rates. So the benefit to that is as the interest rates rise, they're pretty liquid, safe type of funds which the district is allowed to be invested in. And that happened to be what the yield increased in this year.
Happy to add to that too. So I would say the most conservative thing a school district could do would be to leave those funds in your bank account and earn, a little bit of a percentage of interest on that. What we did was looked at our cash flow, looked at how much money we would need, and then we moved our excess cash into a MyLaugh account. MyLaugh is an organization that was created by the Michigan School Business Officials, I believe the Michigan Association of School Superintendents, and then also the Michigan School Board Association. They all came together because we realized that there are restrictions on how the money, what it can be invested in, because we can't lose it, So with making that move over there, we started to earn about 5% on our balances, which is fantastic. So for perspective, what we had been seeing prior to that was earning enough to offset our bank fees. And this year, starting, I believe in January, we started to earn about $100,000 on our cash balances. So we definitely are excited to see that opportunity. We were able to put that into our general fund. And as you know, the board approved some one-time projects. The big one that comes to mind, some athletic projects, improvements like the weight rooms, things that weren't part of our bond program or part of our sinking fund work, that because we had earned some additional money in the general fund, we were able to approve some of those projects. So we definitely recognize that you can't continue to spend your fund balance because ultimately we need that safeguard so that we can adjust when state funding comes in. Different than what we expected. What comes straight to mind, I know we've got board members that lived through the $470 per pupil cut. I didn't see a $470, but they told us to prepare for around that range when the pandemic started because people were staying home. They weren't spending dollars, meaning sales tax wasn't going to the state, which in turn, they told us to brace for a potential impact, not to the next year, but in our current budget. So as you will recall, we did see a hit. We saw a hit in June. We found out about our budget being cut by $2 million. So thank God we had a fund balance that we could fall back on. We didn't have to make drastic cuts. We could wait and see just how bad it would be. If we didn't have that fund balance, our conversations would have been much different than what they were. So very important to have that fund balance. And as Lisa said, we were able to also turn that into a better credit rating so that when we do sell these bonds to do the construction work in our projects, it saves our community interest costs, which again is a wonderful thing. So a lot of good things going on this past school year. I will touch upon, again, we've talked about this multiple times, that budget variance. We had planned for a positive budget variance to the tune of about $1 million. So
Your time is up.
Okay, I'll wrap it up. So we had already accounted for that in this 23-24 school year budget. So we only came in better by about $100,000 more than what we had budgeted for. So we aren't going to see a huge shift there. But as you know, some of the things as far as expenditures go, we can't spend a penny more than what the board authorized us. So we have to be conservative. And in some areas, for instance, maintenance and operations, we have to plan for something maybe breaking in the buildings that we need to be able to fix right away. So we always are going to have a budget variance that is favorable, but we have tried our best to account for that and make sure that our budget for the next year takes that into account. So I will take a minute too and say thank you again to Plant Moran. They are fantastic partners for us, not only during year-end audit. They come in and offer that external lens to make sure that the process we have in place are working. They're safeguarding the funds that have been trusted to us. They're making sure that what those funds were intended for are being spent that way. As Lisa shared with the COVID grants, there was very specific restrictions on how those funds would be spent. The state government has already been visiting districts and started sampling to make sure that those funds were spent the way that they were approved to be spent. Happy to say we had no findings from the state as well when they were checking our records. So I appreciate a lot of that came too from Plant Moran, because throughout the school year, as these requirements come out, they put on professional development for the business offices in the school district so we can be aware of the requirements and prepare for them so we have a good solid year end with no findings and an unmodified opinion on our financial statements. So
Thank you.
a lot of great news this year.
Any other questions? Mrs. Burton?
You touched on one. What I wanted to talk about for a moment was just for the benefit of those who may be listening, the importance of having that fund balance. 15 to 20% is what's recommended by MSBO, and thankfully we've been there for a number of years. But absolutely, I was one of them, and there are others. Mr. Johnson, I believe Mrs. Jarvis was on the board at the time when we did get in October a $462 cut, which doesn't sound like a lot. But that equates to many millions of dollars that we were told in the middle, or the middle of the fall, once our classrooms are staffed and our year is going, that we weren't going to get many millions of dollars that we had budgeted from the state. Those things happen, and they've happened within the last, it was about 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. So we do have to have, this is basically, the fund balance is the equivalent really of in your family having an emergency savings account. Hopefully you do, so that when the unexpected happens, you're prepared for it. One of the other important things that this helps us is to not have to borrow at the beginning of the school year, because as illogical as it seems, the state does not begin paying for making the payments to school districts until October, but we have to pay our teachers in August and September. They can't wait 2 months to get paid. So if we didn't have that fund balance, we would, and in lean years when we were coming through the recession in 2008, 2009, we did have to borrow in order to have that fund, to have those funds, to be able to pay our staff for the first 2 months of that school year. So having that fund balance is really, really important so that we can pay our staff without borrowing any money and incurring those interest costs and saving the district money, and weather unexpected storms, because it did happen in 2008, 2009. It almost happened, Mrs. Smith, as you alluded to a moment ago, almost happened again just a year or two ago. So we have to be prepared for those kinds of things. So that's why that 15 to 20% is so important. And again, I'd like to commend our entire administrative team on advising the board well on how to spend the legacy costs. The plan was really thorough and well thought out, and you can see it now when you look around and you hear pockets of news popping up saying districts are having to lay off so many individuals or having to slash budgets and having to slash programming because the ESSERS funds are drying up. Well, we knew from the very beginning that they were very short term. These are just for a couple of years. And I would like to thank again our administrative team for the recommendations that were brought forward that very definitely stated and very definitely were planned for that these are one-time dollars and we cannot hire staff with them because 2 years later the funding isn't going to be there. So again, thank you very much. We were able to make, as a district, we were able to make very wise purchases and not go through the pain that we're seeing some other districts. And it kind of cracks me up when they sound panicky that, oh my goodness, this money is drying up. We knew from the very beginning it's very short-term dollars. So again, thank you for the very, very wise recommendations. And to Allison and your entire department, thank you for the superb work that you do. That is no small task. That is enormous, and school business officials are held in high esteem, and having high quality folks like yourself is very difficult to find. Don't think for a moment that we take that for granted. But thank you to you and your entire department for running the financial portion of our district very, very well, and to our entire staff for respecting those dollars, using them well when they're allocated, and accounting for them properly. It makes it a joy to hear these kind of reports back from Plant Moran. And I'm thrilled to hear yet again we have an unmodified opinion. That's fabulous. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs.
Well
Burton.
stated.
Anything else from the board?
Can I add one thing, President Johnson? Ms. Burton, you jogged my memory about that last slide that we saw from Plant Moran too with the grants. I just wanted to preface, this is our last year to use those funds, so you saw a couple of the grants that still had some remaining funds. Those aren't funds that are being sent back. We have this year to spend those down. We intentionally tried to evenly spread them over the last 3 years. So this will be the last year, and of course we're having conversations with our leadership team about this being the last year and bring the board a balanced budget for the 24-25 school year. So that's on our radar.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Thank you, Mrs. Vargo, Mr. Marchese, for being here. We appreciate all the work you do.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mrs. Burton, to accept the financial statements 2022-2023. Mrs. Bonifield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
President Johnson?
Yes, that motion carries. Thank you. That takes us now to item 6C, approval of bid results, Franklin and Cleveland Roofing. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mrs. Jarvis?
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the recommendation of the owner's representative, Plant Moran Real Point, to award the contract for roofing replacement at Franklin High School to Lutz Roofing, Shelby, Michigan, and Royal Roofing, Lake Orion, Michigan, for Cleveland Elementary, in the amount of $4,246,400, plus 6% contingency in the amount of $254,800, for a total approved project amount of $4,501,200, and authorize the superintendent or her designee to negotiate and execute final contracts.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Acosta, and we'll welcome Mr. Francis. Good evening.
Good evening, President Johnson. We have, as discussed at last week's Committee of the Whole, a sinking fund project planned for this summer, and it's simply a continuation of the roofing projects that we have been doing over the past several years. So right now, we have the process in place. We're following the 10-year facility plan via the sinking fund. And as we talked about a little bit at the Committee of the Whole, both Lutz and Royal have been on our roofs multiple times. We have had success with them as the roofer for past projects. We're very confident and comfortable moving into next summer with Franklin and Cleveland, and we do recommend both of these vendors to you.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Questions or
welcome.
comments from the board? Mrs. Bonifield.
Hello, Mr. Francis.
Good evening.
I think at one time we have a 10-year plan on redoing our roofs and other capital projects, and I think the roofing costs kind of got out of control for a while. Can you just talk about that a little bit? I think we slowed our roll down a little bit, and now we're getting back to it, and the prices seem to be coming back down.
That is correct. The market went a little haywire there for a while, and we saw the price per square foot of roofs as we have them currently constructed to replace really went up and up. We see with this particular recent bid package that they're coming back down to more of the realm that we were used to seeing previously. We're back into the teens now, when at one point we were flirting around the $40 per square foot mark. So we are back on track. We've been, over the past few years, we did have several roofs that were designed and ready to go. We've finished some of these each year still. We've kind of soldiered on, continued. We did slow it down a little bit at the real height and peak of that. But at this time, we're looking good. We're getting many roofs done. If we keep doing 2 or even potentially 3, if we have a couple smaller buildings, we will have this district taken care of pretty soon, because we've knocked several out. And obviously, for this past summer, Stevenson, that's a large chunk of their roof was done. And looking at the summer of '24, a large chunk of Franklin's roof would be done. So those are 2 big buildings we have.
Thank you, Mr. Francis.
You're welcome.
Other questions or comments? Mrs. Burton.
Mr. Francis, our sinking fund is largely utilized for what we call the big three, parking lots, roofs, and boilers. Can you remind me again approximately how long we could expect a roof to last? And knowing, too, that we don't replace, in some buildings that are large, we don't replace the entire roof all at one time. But when we replace a chunk of roof, how long could we expect that to last typically?
Proper maintenance, proper draining, and all of these are being done. We're having actually with codes today versus how they were done 20-plus years ago, that there's more higher R factor. We have more insulation in them. We have to have a bit of a steeper pitch to the drains on the roofs. So it's really, generally speaking, 20 years is a nice, just easy, clean answer. The more you take care of them, the more you get up there and clear out the drains, you get the water off of the roof when it's been pooling, et cetera, the longer they'll last. But it's the simplest, most straightforward answer would be to say, you would presume 20-plus years.
Okay. And then that sinking fund we utilize on a rather a rolling basis. Which one is up next as far as roofs, boilers, parking lots? And there are always some, when we have 23 buildings to maintain, there are always going to be the next items up on the list.
And those are the planned items. As you know, we are about to start something with the outfall over at Stevenson, and that's something that wasn't originally on our plan, but we're trying to get that shored back up and fixed and not have further damage. We talked about that last month, but just as an example, you're completely correct.
And again, thank you to our citizens who supported our sinking fund, because that does allow us to use our state dollars for education inside the classrooms when we can use our sinking funds to maintain those large ticket items to keep our buildings safe and warm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Acosta, to approve the bid results for Franklin and Cleveland Roofing. Mrs. Bonifield, would you take the roll?
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta.
Yes.
Mrs. Burton.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. President Johnson.
Yes, the motion carries. Thank you. That will now take us to item 8. We don't have anything under 7, instruction matters, so we would go to 8, personnel matters. Item A is teachers for approval. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mrs. Frank.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and offer employment for the 2023-24 school year to the teachers listed on the attached document.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. And Mr. Abate. Good evening.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. So our new teachers that we are presenting, our new staff members, excuse me, we're presenting to the board this evening, fill a range of needs across the district, both the elementary and secondary levels, both special education and general education. They're all very well qualified to fill these positions. They've been fully vetted through our extensive interview process. We're confident they will perform at a high level and represent Livonia Public Schools in a manner that is consistent with our shared vision and collective commitments. These positions have also been included in the 2023-2024 budget. We're very pleased to be recommending these talented professionals to join our LPS family, and with your approval, we are very excited to have them working with our students.
Thank you, Mr. Abate. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Jarvis, to approve the teachers on the list. And Mrs. Bonifield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta.
Yes.
Mrs. Burton.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. President Johnson.
Yes, that motion carries. Thank you. That takes us to item 8B, teachers for tenure. And may I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mrs. Bradford.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and acknowledge that tenure status has been granted to the following teachers effective on the respective date. Jacqueline Glowacki, October 4th, 2023. Julia Palayan, October 8th, 2023. Matthew Radio, October 19th, 2023.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mrs. Acosta, and we'll welcome Mrs. Keats. Good evening.
Good evening.
Our teachers for tenure on this agenda have successfully completed the district's requirements for probationary teachers, including years of service, evaluations, overall performance, and documentation of student growth. We have carefully reviewed all supporting materials along with the recommendations from our building administration and have verified that they should be granted tenure status with Livonia Public Schools. We wish to offer our congratulations for reaching this milestone and look forward to their continued success working in LPS.
Thank you, Mrs. Keats. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mrs. Acosta, to approve teachers for tenure. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes, that motion carries. Thank you. We do have an item 8C. It doesn't appear on the agenda, but we do have an item there, and it's teachers for leave. So may I have a motion?
President Johnson.
Mrs. Frank?
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and approve the request for a leave of absence as listed below. Anwar Mustafa, 2023-2024 school year.
Support.
Stereo. We have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Bradford. And again, Mr. Abate.
Yes, thank you. The staff member listed in your documentation is requesting leave in accordance with their collective bargaining agreement, and we ask that you please approve the leave as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Abate. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Bradford, to approve the leave of absence. And Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Did I write down wrong? I got Mrs. Frank and Mrs. Bradford.
Mrs.
Oh, is that?
Mrs. Frank and Mrs. Bradford, yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes, and President Johnson?
Yes, that motion carries. Thank you. That takes us to item, which would be 8D, resignations. No motion is required. That is just for our information. So that takes us to item 8E, retirements. And may I have a motion, please?
President Johnson?
Mrs. Bonnefield. I mean, sorry. Mrs. Burton.
That's okay.
All the Bs.
Yes, there's a lot of us. Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District adopt the attached resolutions of appreciation for services rendered by Mary Helen Deagle, Ann Peterson, and Nancy Verzi.
Support.
Was that Mrs. Acosta? We have a motion by Mrs. Burton, supported by Mrs. Acosta. And again, Mrs. Keats.
Hello again. Tonight we honor and congratulate 3 members of our LPS family who are retiring from their positions with Livonia Public Schools. As these staff members leave the district, they take with them a combined total of 86 years of experience. On behalf of the administration, I would like to thank our retirees for their dedicated years of service to the students of LPS, and we ask that the board please adopt their attached resolutions of appreciation.
Thank you, Mrs. Keats. Questions, comments from the board?
Congratulations.
Mrs. Burton.
It's always with mixed emotions that we vote on our retirements. We wish our retirees well in their next chapter of their lives. That's exciting. I'm sure there's a lot of fun things they're looking forward to, and at the same time, we're losing folks who have been very, very special to our students for a number of years, and usually very valuable members of our staff. So it's with mixed emotions. Sometimes we say, if we vote no, would you stay? And it never works like that. But thank you very much to our retirees.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Burton, supported by Mrs. Acosta, to approve the resolutions of retirees. And Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes, that motion carries. Thank you. That takes us now to item 9, hearing from board members, and item A is reading of board policies, fiscal management. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson?
Mrs. Frank.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the Policy Committee and adopt board policy language per the attached documents for the following policies: Fiscal Management, Board Policy DIA, Account System; Board Policy DIB, Financial Reports and Statements; Board Policy DJCA, Payday Schedules.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Bradford. And Mrs. Smith, are you going to talk to us about these?
Thank you. We've had the opportunity now at study sessions and past board meetings to go over these updates to board policy. As you'll recall, these aren't changes necessarily in practice, just updating some of the verbiage to be in line with what we currently call them. So the account systems, again, updating that to the Michigan School Michigan School Accounting Manual Bulletin 1022 was the change in that board policy. For any of these, of course, if you'd like me to read them, I'd be happy to. We had the opportunity to do that at our first reading. So I won't unless you would like me to. Good.
Does anybody want them read? I think we've read them.
They've been read.
We've gone over them a number of
Yeah.
times, and we read them at the committee of the whole, so.
Yep. Okay.
I think that's pretty good. All right, so we have a motion by Mrs. Frank, supported by Mrs. Bradford, to approve the second reading of board policies. And Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
I would. Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta.
Yes.
Mrs. Burton.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson.
Yes, that motion carries. We're now going to take, looks like item I before a hearing from board members, and it's approval of superintendent's evaluation. And Mrs. Acosta, do you have that motion? Is there a motion?
Yes.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the evaluation of Superintendent Andrea Oquist, completed on October 2nd, 2023, utilizing the MASB Superintendent Evaluation Tool, for which she received a rating of highly effective.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Acosta, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. I don't believe we need any discussion on this item. Nope.
We can.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Mrs. Burton?
Just that I believe we are very, very fortunate to have Mrs. Oquist as our superintendent. Finding a qualified superintendent is more than finding a very good educator. The job is far more complex than that. As I see it, it's really threefold, and it's trying to get all three prongs of this that make it so difficult. And that is finding someone who is well-versed in public education, who is well-versed in how to run a school district, and well-versed in the legislative process, because at least in the state of Michigan, our funding is tied to the state of Michigan. And there are complexities that come with that. If you're not aware and knowing fully how to work with our legislators in order to receive the maximum funding that's possible to provide a good quality education for our students, we would be really, really in trouble. With Livonia Public Schools being the 9th largest district in the state of Michigan, we need to have a superintendent who is superb in all three of those areas. You are, and we are so very, very fortunate to have you at the helm. On top of being superbly qualified, we hear throughout the district on a regular basis how highly esteemed you are. Our staff, our parents, you are all over the district all the time. People wonder, how is she here? Because she's everywhere. We wonder when she sleeps. But to be held in high esteem, to be cared for because you care for others so well, and to be able to perform all of the functions of your job, we are very, very fortunate, and it's not taken for granted for a moment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Mrs. Bradford.
I echo the sentiments of my colleague, Mrs. Burton. One of our most important jobs that we do as a Board of Education is evaluate our superintendent. We do this on an annual basis, and every year it's a yearly evaluation. We utilize the MASB evaluation tool, and I can solidly say that we are very fortunate to have our superintendent, Mrs. Oquist, with us in this district. This is a very large district. We're about the 10th, 11th in the state, maybe.
Ninth.
Oh, ninth, we moved up. All right. So, yes, we have lots of students, lots of staff, and just really proud to have her at our helm, serving this district and the students. She does it with just grace and dignity, and she does a wonderful job. We're very lucky to have her, so congratulations, Mrs. Oquist, and thank you for all that you do for everybody.
Thank you, Mrs. Bradford. Any others? Mrs. Frank.
I also just wanted to say, as you said, President Johnson, at the beginning of the meeting, one of our 3 tasks is setting the budget, setting policy, and then evaluating the superintendent. So we don't evaluate any of the administrators. We evaluate the superintendent. And I think one of the best parts about the closed session was it was really a state of our district. What is the state of our district? And it was the information that you provided was so impactful to all of us, I think, as we look at the state of our district. And because you meet the criteria for highly effective, I don't think we're stopping there. I think there's so much more that you and your team want to achieve and want to take Livonia Public Schools, and I think that is awesome. And just to be able to see where we're going, but what the plans are for the future, what the budget is set for the priorities for the future, is really exciting for Livonia Public Schools. So while this is your grade, it is really a grade for your staff, your team, and your administrators. So thank you so much for what you do and how you lead.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Others? I can't say any more.
I know.
I think it's all been said, and we appreciate everything you do for the district and our kiddos. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion to approve the superintendent evaluation by Mrs. Acosta, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. And Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll?
I certainly will. Mrs. Acosta? Yes. Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes, that motion carries. Thank you again. That takes us then to item 9B, hearing from board members. And as is customary, I'll open it up for anyone who wants to say anything this evening.
I think we're supposed to do audience communication first.
we are.
No? We do hearing from board members first.
On the
Then we'll-
agenda, it says prior to.
All right?
Oh.
We'll do it that way then.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
All right.
Good catch.
All right, so for those of you who have been with us, I will continue on now with our audience communication. You have the timer going?
You don't need the time. Yeah.
You don't have to.
No.
I have Naomi Hughes and Trinity Atkins. Are they here?
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Today I'm here to speak on my mom, Mama J. I know that the cameras can't see the audience, but I know all of you can right now. And here, there are people supporting her for being the genuine person she is and her actions being pure. My mom is a good person who doesn't deserve the disrespect that she's been shown. She has done nothing but be respectful, help people reach their goals, as well as be an outlet for all these students. And when I argue no sub has ever had this effect on students, I mean no sub has ever had this effect. The fact that the argument on why she has been dismissed has been counter-argued, and it took as long as it did to get handled, baffles me and shows that proper due diligence was not done. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Trinity. I am also Mama J's daughter. I am actually currently a guest long-term substitute in, Livonia Public Schools. And I actually see it through the groundworks. I actually see everything as it goes on. And as soon as I first started going through teaching, all the kids were like, "You look very familiar. Is your mom Mama J?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Wow, I love her. She's amazing." And I see all these kids run up to my mom just saying, "We love you. Oh my gosh." I've literally seen first account students go to their faculty and to their principals for help, and they've turned a blind eye. Just recently, a student lost her phone. That was over $2,000. The principal said there's nothing they can do. The police officer on board said, "Oh, there's nothing we can do." And it took to her crying out for my mom, to a guest substitute for help, for something to be done. We have a saying in our family that if something happens at the midnight, in the morning it'll be taken care of. And that's the truth with my mom. If I have a problem, or if any of the students have a problem, it's as soon as a tear comes out of your eye, it's fixed immediately. And now this girl has her phone back because she nipped it in the butt. And these kids see that she cares. And I see it as a substitute teacher, that she cares. And she's a big inspiration to me to go forward. Like, as I see her, I'm like, wow, I really want to implement with my students and really have that great relationship with them. And I've started forming some great relationships, and it's all because of my inspiration, which is my mother. And it's very disheartening seeing how she's been treated in the Livonia Public Schools, and I think we should be able to make this right by the end of today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Ida Hunter.
I want to first of all thank you all for giving me this opportunity to speak on behalf of the Bring Back Mama J petition. I have known Juanita Francis, AKA Mama J, for 24 years. I am familiar with her character, personality, professionalism, and I know her to be ethically sound. She has displayed a professional persona for the entire time that I have known her. I know that she has only the best interests of her students at heart. Miss Francis, AKA Mama J, when allowed, will be a precious asset to the Livonia school system. Therefore, I highly recommend that you favorably vote to bring back Mama J in order to bring back the smiles and the education of our wonderful students. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Lisa Beach Amin. Am I saying that right?
You say amen.
Amen.
That's
Okay. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you so much for letting me speak again. At last month's meeting, a bus driver requested that a safety video be made regarding bus safety. And about a week later, that video showed up in our emails. So thank you for that. So my request today is that LPS create a video to promote positive behavior from our students and to help teach our upper elementary and middle school students peaceful conflict resolution. A simple video could have a positive impact for the students and families of LPS. A simple reminder to be kind to each other or how to resolve your conflicts peacefully. Coming from the district would send a very strong message that fighting and bullying have no place in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is it Leslie Walter? She left. Okay. Reese Halson? Hodson? Good evening.
Good evening. I'm going to start off and thank you for hearing me. I am no longer at Franklin.
I graduated this year when my friends at Franklin told me that Mama J was banned from teaching. It shocked me because Mama J was always a great sub. She never let her emotions dictate how she taught. If she was having a rough day, she didn't put that towards us. She kept that and gave her best for her students. During, and this might have been after COVID, Franklin started limiting bathroom times to students. And Mama J said, if a teacher says you can't use the bathroom, you come to me and I'll tell them, and I will fight for you. So you have the right to use the bathrooms. She should not have to fight to get her license back. She is an amazing sub who will fight for anyone and everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Tim. I can't read the last name. That's you. What's the last name? Klum.
Yes. How's everyone doing today?
Good.
Good. I'm just speaking for Mama J today. So I think she's a really good sub, and I was told by my good friend Tyler that she was no longer with Livonia, and it was shocking. But me and my friend Tyler made a petition to see if we can bring her back, and we got 610 people to sign it across. So that's all I really got to say, that people do want her back, and I think we should let her come back. So, free Mama J.
Thank you. The next speaker, I can't read the name. Is it Stefan? Stephen?
Young?
Young? Is that the name?
What road is it?
He lives on
He lived
Pearl?
on Pearl Court in Pittsfield Township. Apparently he left. Okay. All right. The next speaker is Christian Adams. Good evening.
I'm here to speak on Mama J. I had her since freshman year. I wasn't big on talking or getting to know anybody, and then I got a sub with Mama J, and just her being positive and smile and meet me at the at the door, saying bye to everybody, just felt amazing being around it, and it helped me a lot. And then I go to practice, all I hear is nothing but good. But Mama J, if she's subbing, she's a great teacher, great sub, my bad.
Thank you. The next speaker is Haley Fugit. She left.
Travis?
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 The next speaker, is it Travis?
Lives in Westland?
Lives on, I can't even read the,
Sandal Lane?
it looks like it's,
Not here.
apparently he's not here. Okay. The next speaker is it Sherry Walker? Sherry Walker? No? Okay. And Cardwell? Okay. What's the first name? Omari, okay.
Oh, sorry about that.
Good afternoon. My name is Omari Walker. I'm a junior at Franklin. I've had Mama J as a sub since my freshman year. I'm not a junior. Mama J, she has taught me a lot of things. She's taught me how to be vocal. She's taught me how to respect people. Before Mama J, I wasn't very big on talking. Mama J has helped me so much, especially doing my work. Mama J is not only a sub who just cares about the money, she cares about all her students. She cares about everybody in every single building she works in. And I just think that we should bring her back. Mama J is the best sub. She cares about everything and everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last speaker is Noah Morris. Good evening.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you today. I stand before you to shed light on a grave injustice that has occurred within our educational institution. It is a matter of the utmost importance, not only for the individual involved, but also for the principle of fairness and accountability that should guide our actions. I come before you to speak on behalf of a valued member of our staff who has been wrongfully terminated. This individual, whom I will refer to as Mama J, has dedicated countless hours, energy, and passion to the betterment of our school community. She has been a pillar of support for our students, an inspiration to her colleagues, and a true advocate for excellence in education. It is deeply disheartening to witness the unjust dismissal of such an exceptional educator. Mama J consistently went above and beyond her duties, demonstrating an unwavering commitment to the academic and personal growth of her students. She fostered an inclusive classroom environment that encouraged critical thinking, creativity, and respect for diverse perspectives. Moreover, her contributions have extended beyond the walls of her classroom, positively impacting our school's culture and climate. The decision to terminate Mama J was made under questionable circumstances, and the process followed lacked transparency and due diligence. It is crucial that we acknowledge the potential human error that can occur in such situations, and that we afford the individuals the opportunity to defend themselves against any allegations made. Fairness should underpin all of our actions, particularly when they involve the livelihoods and reputations of our dedicated staff members. I implore you, esteemed members of the board, to reconsider the dismissal of Mama J. Let us uphold the values of justice and equity, which are the very bedrock of our educational system. I urge you to conduct a thorough review of the facts surrounding this case, ensuring that all parties involved have the opportunity to present themselves and their perspectives. By rectifying this wrongful termination, we not only restore justice to Mama J, but we also send a powerful message to the entire educational community. We reaffirm our commitment to fairness, integrity, and nurturing of a supportive classroom environment for all students. Our families and community are watching, and it is our duty to demonstrate that we stand up for what is right. In conclusion, I urge you to reconsider the decision to terminate Mama J and to take immediate action to rectify this injustice. Let us ensure that our school remains a place where dedication, excellence, and integrity are not only valued but celebrated. Together, let us build a stronger, fairer, more compassionate educational community for the benefit of all. Thank you.
Thank you. I do not have any more blue slips, so we move on to hearing from board members. And at this point, I'll open it up to anyone who wants to speak tonight. Seeing none, is there any more business to be brought tonight? If not, then thank you for all who were here tonight and spoke, and thank you to our audience at home, and good evening.